Let's look at right, what is WPI and what is CPI. Okay, WPI basically stands for Wholesale Price Index. Understand this? WPI basically stands for Wholesale Price Index, and CPI stands for Consumer Price Index. Is it okay? WPI stands for Wholesale Price Index, CPI stands for Consumer Price Index. What is the basic difference here? In case of the WPI, what we measure is by how much percentage the price levels have increased in the wholesale market. What do you mean by wholesale market? Where there are transactions which are conducted, where buying and selling is done by businesses. One company will sell the goods to another company. That is the basic idea of a wholesale market. So in the wholesale market, where the businesses to business transactions are taking place, where one company is selling to another company, over a period of time, by how much percentage the price levels have increased. That calculation is called as a WPI. And in the calculation of WPI, please remember this, we will not include the indirect taxes imposed by the government. We generally exclude even the transportation cost, which will add to the market prices later. So understand this very carefully. In the wholesale market, we measure what? Or in WPI, we basically measure by how much percentage the price levels in the wholesale market have increased. Whereas in case of CPI, remember this, in case of CPI, which stands for Consumer Price Index, which is also referred as retail inflation. Is it okay? Which is also referred as retail inflation. What we do is we basically measure by how much percentage the price levels in the retail market. And again, when you say retail market, it is the market where all of us, including me, including you, purchase goods and services. So in the retail market, by how much percentage the price level of basket of commodities has increased is measured. Is it okay? WPI, wholesale market. CPI, retail market, right? Wholesale market, business to business, retail market, all of us who are going to purchase these particular goods or services or simply commodities. Done. Now, another very important difference between WPI and CPI is when you talk about WPI and measure WPI, we do not include services. Remember this. We do not include services, right? Whatever the services are there, we do not include these particular services while calculating the idea of a WPI. Whereas when you're calculating CPI, we include services also. Now, in addition to this, another very important difference between WPI and CPI is in case of calculation of WPI, we take the base year of 2011 and 12. In case of CPI, we take the base year of 2012. Now, in addition to this, please also remember this, Government of India set up Ramesh Chand Committee, to give recommendation with respect to rebasing the idea of a WPI. That is there in the current affairs. Please be very, very careful. Generally, the idea is the government has to revise or rebase these particular parameters, both WPI, CPI, GDP. The calculations have to be revised. As per international norms, generally they will say that before the interval of 10 years, before the time period of 10 years itself, the parameters calculation, you will have to rebase them or recalculate these particular parameters, or a new methodology has to be introduced. So in this particular regard, Government of India set up a Ramesh Chand committee with respect to giving recommendations on WPI. But more importantly, what is the present methodology? Let's have a look at it. Currently, we are using a base year of 2011 and 2012. And please understand, earlier we used to use a base year of 0405 or 2004 2005. For rebasing, for basically changing the methodology and calculation, Government of India set up a Soumitra Chaudhary Working Committee. Remember this. Soumitra Chaudhary Working Committee was set up by Government of India, and this particular committee gave a recommendation of a changing the base year from 0405 to 11 and 12. Now, in addition to this, they also recommended changing the number of commodities which are considered to calculate the WPI. That is, earlier we used to calculate by taking 676 commodities within WPI. Now this has been shifted or changed to 697 commodities. Overall, 190 new commodities or new items have been added, and 146 old items have been dropped or have been withdrawn. Now, with respect to this, some of you will start calculating, sir, if this is the number of items added, this is the number of items withdrawn, right? The consolidation is not happening. We are not able to shift from 676 to 697. There is some discrepancy. No, there is no discrepancy. Please understand this. When I'm talking about items here, some of these particular items are considered in the form of a group. Is it okay? Some of the items are considered in the form of a group. That is a precise reason when you add 199 and subtract 146, you may not arrive at 697. Perfectly all right. Do not worry about it. Next, this is published once every month. This is published by Economic Advisor within the Ministry of Commerce. Okay. So these are certain points related to WPI. Now let's have a look at what rebasing has been done with respect to wholesale price index. This is the old series as per 2004-5, and this is a new series with the base year of 11 and 12. Now please understand this. The total number of items has been changed from 676 to 697. Okay, and total weightage of all the commodities should be how much? 100%. Next important point, please have a look at this. There are three important groups of the commodities here. All the 697 or earlier 676 have been taken and put under three groups. One is the primary articles, second one is fuel and power, third one is manufactured items. In none of these particular three groups, or look at the groups itself, you will realize there is no representation of services, or the services as earlier mentioned are not considered when I'm calculating WPI. Next important point. Out of these three particular groups, primary articles, fuel and power, and manufactured items, earlier also it was the manufactured items which had the highest weightage, and even today with respect to rebasing, manufactured items carries the highest weightage. Simply remember the roundabout number, 64% weightage has been given to manufactured items. Out of 697, highest number of commodities are also present in the same group, that is manufactured items. Second highest has been given to the primary articles with respect to the weightage as well as the number of items. 117 item groups are present in the primary articles, and it will carry the weightage of 22%, or if you want to round it off, let's say 23%. Okay. And the lowest weightage has been given to fuel and power, around 13%, and the lowest number of items or item groups are also present within this particular fuel and power, that is 16. So what you need to do is mug up either in the ascending order or descending order of the weightages. Right? For me, the usual preference is descending order. Highest weightage for manufactured items, that is a 64%. Second highest is for primary articles, 23%, and remaining 13% has been given to fuel and power. Now, why this is important? Generally, what UPSC tends to do is it will give you any of these particular groups, or it will give you all the groups and ask you to arrange them in ascending or descending order. One type of a question, or it will simply ask you to find out which of the following groups has the highest weightage within the WPI. Now, these are certain important changes that have happened with respect to RBI rebasing. Now, in addition to this, another very important change is WPI food inflation. Remember this also. We have started calculating food inflation under WPI, and for the calculation of food inflation, what we are doing is we are taking some of the commodities from primary article group and some of the food products from the manufactured items itself. Basic argument is this. Earlier, we did not calculate a WPI food inflation. Follow this very carefully. Earlier, we did not calculate a WPI food inflation, whereas we calculated CPI food inflation. Even today, we calculate a CPI food inflation, or else they'll simply say CPI food index. Basic idea is this. In case of Indian economy, especially in the last couple of years, it has been the food articles which has been contributing to inflation. Is it okay? I'll repeat the statement. Two groups are there, to be more precise. One is a food and the other one is a fuel group. Okay, one is a food and the other one is a fuel group. These are the two groups which have been contributing to the inflation in the domestic market. So in order to measure the price variation in this particular group of items, that is the food articles, already there is a CPI food inflation. But now Government of India has basically added a calculation of this even under WPI. That is a precise reason even this particular point of information related to WPI rebasing becomes very, very important. So this is a discussion with respect to WPI rebasing. Now we have seen the concept of a WPI. Now let's have a discussion related to concept of a CPI. CPI stands for Consumer Price Index. Now certain important points related to CPI. First one, CPI basically measures the increase in the price level in the retail market. Is it okay? Remember this. CPI measures increase in the price level in the retail market. WPI, wholesale market, where the business transactions are between business to business, company to company. In case of a CPI, these particular transactions are happening basically from the seller to a buyer. That is where all of us will purchase the goods and services in the market that is called as a retail market. So whenever in the retail market the price levels will increase like this, the measurement of that is basically a retail inflation or CPI, consumer price index. Now understand this. Right now, what is the process here? Right now, we are basically measuring the CPI under two heads. One, we will measure CPI for urban level, that is for urban parts of India, we will measure CPI. It is referred as CPI urban. For rural India, we measure again CPI, which is called as a CPI rural. Is it okay? So I'll repeat the statement here. CPI is measured at urban level. CPI is measured at rural level. In addition to this, for the full Indian market, we also measure this particular CPI, which is called as CPI combined. So we measure CPI urban, CPI rural, CPI combined. And in the newspapers, generally when you come across the concept of a CPI, until unless it is specifically mentioned, it will be CPI combined. Let me go to the next point here. Before we had this particular concept of a CPI urban rural, we had three different types of measurements of CPI. One is IW. IW stands for industrial workers. Second one is UNME, urban non-manual employees. And the third one is AL, agriculture labor. Apart from this, there is also another concept of a rural label for CPI. Now understand this, before we had a CPI rural urban, we had different types of CPI indices. Industrial workers, urban non-manual employees, as well as agriculture labor. Now, before discussing the latest CPI, let's look at certain points with respect to earlier CPI indices. In case of CPI, like I said, there are industrial workers, urban non-manual employees, and agriculture laborers. Now, with respect to these particular parameters, what are the important points that you're supposed to remember? The base year for the calculation for industrial worker, urban non-manual employees, as well as AL respectively will be 2001, 84-85 and 86-87. Second, the number of articles which are covered will be 392 in case of IW, 180 in case of UNME, and 60 in case of agriculture labor. In case of the first as well as the second, that is urban non-manual employees as well as industrial workers, the services are included in the basket for the calculation. And in case of AL, services are not included. There is no inclusion of these particular services. And the fourth and the most important point that you must remember, who will publish these particular indices? Who will publish these particular indices? In case of industrial worker, it is a Ministry of Labor. It is the same in case of agriculture labor also. Whereas in case of urban non-manual employees, it is the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. These are certain factual information related to these particular indices. Now, what is the importance of these particular indices? Where the indices are actually used? There is a concept of a MNREGA. This is a scheme or a program which is run by Government of India, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Some of the books would have replaced this particular term act with the scheme, but the basic idea is the wages that are announced by the government, wages that are decided by the government under MNREGA generally are indexed, generally are connected with what is the CPI AL. And in addition to this, this particular concept of industrial worker is also very, very important for a simple reason. CPI IW, which is calculated and published by the government, is generally used by the government in awarding or in providing something called as a dearness allowance to government employees. Now, what is the concept of a dearness allowance? Have a look at this. If you are an employee in the private sector company, your salary will keep on changing. Obviously, it will keep on increasing from 1 year to next year. This year, imagine your salary is 1 lakh rupees a month. Obviously, next year, certain increment would be provided to you. As a result of this increment, your salary will increase. Again, the same thing happens after 2 more years. So when you're an employee in a private sector, annually you can expect a hike in your salary. Same thing cannot be said for government employees. In case of government employees, generally the government sets up a commission famously referred to as the pay commission, and this particular pay commission will give recommendation to government as to by how much percentage the salaries of the employees, that is the government employees, should be hiked, should be increased. But please understand this, once the pay commission award is announced by the government, again till the next pay commission is set up, the salary will remain same. So problem here is from 1 year to next year, because of inflation, the cost of the goods as well as services in the market will keep on rising upwards. But the salary of the government employees remains constant. Don't you think that will have a limiting effect? Or because of inflation, how much goods or services that they can purchase using the same salary, it will become lower and lower over a period of time. So what generally government of India does is, it will provide the salary, but it will keep on providing in addition to salary something referred to as allowances. And the famous allowance that is announced by the government for their employees is the concept of a dearness allowance. And the idea of a dearness allowance, which is generally announced based on the basic pay. It is given as a percentage of basic pay. Now, this particular dearness allowance from one time period to another time period is adjusted, is changed by taking into consideration CPI IW. Now, in addition to this point, please also remember that this particular concept of a dearness allowance is given for those particular employees who are in the service. What about those particular people who are already retired, who are pensioners? Don't you think if the pension amount is kept constant like this, if the pension amount is kept constant, their incomes which they are earning in the form of a pension amount now, because of inflation, the power of purchasing will be very limited. So even in case of pensioners, again government pensioners, what government of India does is, for workers they will provide a dearness allowance. For the pensioners, government announces a dearness relief. For pensioners, it will announce dearness relief. So remember these 2 points. Why these 2 points are important? Very recently, this particular CPI IW, the base year has been changed. Is it okay? Very recently, the government has changed the composition of CPI IW. What are the changes which have been announced? Have a look at this. In case of a CPI IW, what they have done is, the base year has been changed from 2001 to 2016. That is the first very important point. After this, the weightages which are provided to the groups which are considered for the calculation of CPI IW, even the weightages have been changed. Now, should you mug up the weightages for UPSC exam? No, that is not required. In addition to this, the number of item groups or articles which are covered has been increased from 392 to 463 commodities now. So these are some of the very important changes that have been announced by the government with respect to CPI IW. Now come back to the original discussion here. In case of a CPI, like I've earlier said, there are 2 measures now. That is a CPI urban, CPI rural. And in case of CPI urban and a CPI rural, what is the base year that we are using right now? The latest base year that we have been using is the year 2012. We are using the base year of 2012, and using this particular base year, we are calculating the CPI urban index and CPI rural index as well as the CPI combined index. And it is calculated and published by NSO. Some of the books will write a CSO for a simple reason. Please understand this. Earlier CSO was one organization that was involved in publication of this particular CPI index. But what government of India has done is, it has taken this particular CSO and it has merged this particular body or authority with another authority, NSSO, and the new authority or new institution is NSO. So it is the NSO which is involved in publishing this particular CPI urban, CPI rural as well as CPI combined. And how many articles are there under both of them? In case of CPI rural, 448 articles are there. In case of CPI urban, 460 articles are there. In case of the CPI rural and CPI urban, different weightages have been allocated to different groups. You don't have to mug up all the groups here. Remember, the group that is food and beverage, overall in case of CPI combined, it has the highest weightage, around 46%. I'm rounding off the number. In case of fuel and light, the weightage is around 6.8%. And the miscellaneous group has the weightage of around 28%. So remember, these particular weightage is more than sufficient, because generally these are the groups which are contributing to inflation or the retail inflation in the Indian market. So this is a basic discussion with respect to CPI combined, CPI rural, CPI urban, and the concept of a WPI. Next, just to be on a safer side, have a look at this. These are the main groups under WPI and these are the main groups under CPI. Now, some of you will have a doubt, sir, when you say miscellaneous, what is there in the miscellaneous group? When you say manufacturing, what is there in the manufacturing? Generally, these are the different items or different commodities which are listed in these particular groups. For example, in case of manufacturing, we have chemicals, textiles, wood and paper, etc. In case of food and beverages, cereals, meat, fish, egg, milk, etc. In case of miscellaneous, we have health, transport, communication, education, recreation, etc. So just to be on a safer side, I have provided a list of some of these particular commodities or items which are there in the group which are considered to calculate WPI as well as CPI. Now, should you mug up all of these particular items? My recommendation is please don't do it. For a simple reason, the number of commodities which are there in both, that is WPI as well as CPI, are very, very high. So the probability of asking a question in a list of 697 commodities, in the list of 448 and 460 commodities or items is very, very low. So this is the basic composition of different groups which are used to calculate inflation at a retail level as well as in the wholesale level. Now, generally what you will see is both these particular WPI and CPI are published on monthly basis. That is, every month CPI and WPI is given in the newspaper. And generally, sometimes you will see this kind of a diversion between both of them. That is, in some time period, you will see that CPI is moving at a very faster pace, is increasing. And during the same period, WPI will be declining and entering into a negative period. And that was seen very recently in the year 2020. Now, generally, this kind of a deviation happens. This kind of a diversion between both of them happens for a simple reason. The weightages for CPI is different and for WPI is different. Again, even before weightages, what is considered for calculation of WPI and calculation of CPI are completely different. And the weightages are different. And when I say completely different, I'm simply saying that one is a measurement in wholesale market, that is a B2B transaction. And the second one is measuring the price levels in the retail market. So obviously these are two different markets altogether. And since because these are two different markets, weightages are different. In CPI, services are considered, WPI services are not considered. Obviously, there will be certain difference between both the CPI as well as the WPI. Whenever the prices of fuel keep on increasing to a very great extent, the impact will be felt on both of them because fuels are part of both of them. When the prices of food commodities start increasing at a very higher level and food prices are very, very high in the domestic market or at a retail market, these are generally reflected in higher CPI, or the impact of a higher food prices in the domestic market generally is more on CPI compared to WPI. For a simple reason, weightage of food and beverage is around 46% and it is much lower in case of a WPI. Obviously, because of this difference in the weightages, the impact these will have on both of them will be different. So if you find this kind of a diversion, please do not worry about this. This could be happening because of these kinds of differences which exist between CPI as well as WPI. Now we have taken care of the two measures of inflation, WPI and CPI. Let me go ahead.